Economies develop slows. Land and economic development. Throughout history, secure property rights over land play a major role in economic development. When land ownership is clearly defined and protected, farmers have strong incentive to improve the productivity of the land. They invest in irrigation systems, drainage projects, fertilizer, and better farming techniques. These improvements greatly increase agriculture output over time. But when land ownership is uncertainty, farmers may avoid long-term investments. If the land could be taken away next year, there is little reason to invest heavily in improving it today. Many economic historians argue that the development of secure land ownership systems was a key factor in the rise of modern agriculture production in parts of Europe and North America. Legal systems that recognize and protect land titles allow farmers to treat land as a stable asset. That stability supports long-term investment. Property beyond land. In modern economics, property rights extend far beyond land. Businesses own factories, equipment, and intellectual property. Investors own shares in corporations. Inventors own patents protecting new technologies. Artists and writers own copyrights protecting creative works. These rights allow individuals and organizations to control and profit from assets they create or acquire. Consider the development of new technologies. Creating a new pharmaceutical drug can require years of research and billions of dollars in investment. Without patent protection, a company that develops a successful drug might immediately face competition from others copying the formula without bearing the cost of research. Patent systems attempt to solve this problem by granting temporary exclusive rights to the inventor, encouraging innovation by allowing inventors to recover the cost of research and development. When property rights are weak, the importance of property rights become especially clear when they are weak or absent. In environments where governments frequently compensate property or weak legal systems cannot reliably enforce ownerships, investment often declines dramatically. Businesses avoid expanding operations. Entrepreneurs may move their capital to countries with stronger legal protections. Farmers may limit improvements to land if ownership is uncertain. In extreme cases, economic activity shifts away from formal markets entirely. People will rely on informal arrangements, short-term transactions, or underground economies where assets are harder to track or seize. Strong property rights create an environment where long-term investments become rational. Their absence can quietly strangle an economy before anyone notices. But ownership alone is not enough. For markets to function reliably, economic actors must also be able to make promises about the future and trust that those promises will be honored. That requirement leads to other essential institutional foundation of modern economies: contracts and trust. Imagine a manufacturer in Germany ordering precision components from a supplier in South Korea. The agreement may involve thousands of parts, multiple shipments, strict quality standards, and delivery deadlines coordinated with production schedules in several factories across Europe. The two companies may never meet face to face, yet they commit to contracts worth millions of dollars. The supplier promises to manufacture the components according to agreed specifications. The buyer promises to pay once the goods arrive and pass inspection. Between these promises lie one crucial assumption: the agreement will be enforced. If the supplier delivers faulty components, the buyer can demand replacements or compensation. If the buyer refuses to pay, the supplier can pursue legal remedies. Without that expectation of enforcement, the transaction would be extremely risky. And when transactions become risky, markets begin to shrink. The promise of the future. Most economic activities involve promises about the future. A bank lends money today with the expectation it will be repaid later. A construction company signs a contract to complete a building months or years in the future. A retailer orders product from a manufacturer, expecting deliveries weeks later. Even employment relationships involve contracts. In each case, the transaction does not occur instantaneously. It unfolds across time. And whenever time enters the equation, uncertainty appears. One party may fail to deliver. Circumstances may change. Disputes may arise over what was promised. Contracts are institutional mechanisms designed to manage this uncertainty. They formalize agreements and define what happens if those agreements are broken. The role of courts. Contracts would mean the role of courts. Contracts would mean very little without enforcement. Legal systems provide that enforcement. Courts interpret contracts when disputes arise. Judges determine whether one party failed to fulfill its obligations and decide how compensation or penalties should be applied. This process may sound bureaucratic. This may this process may sound very onerous, but it performs a critical economic function. It allows strangers to cooperate. In small communities, economic transactions may rely heavily on reputation and personal relationships. But modern economies involve millions of interactions between people and organizations that have never met or done business together before. A global supply chain might connect dozens of companies across multiple countries. Without reliable contract enforcement, such systems would struggle to function. Global supply chains. The importance of contracts become especially clear in the context of global trade. Modern supply chains stretch across continents. A smartphone may involve semiconductors manufactured in Taiwan, display panels produced in South Korea, assembly performed in China, and design and software developed in the United States. Each step involves contractual agreements between companies operating under different legal systems. These agreements specify production standards, delivery timelines, pricing arrangements, the liability for defects. Without enforceable contracts, coordinating such complex networks would be nearly impossible. The ability to form reliable agreements across borders allow a global production system to function. Trust as an economic infrastructure. Contracts provide legal structure, but behind that structure lies something equally important: trust. Even the most detailed contract cannot anticipate every possible circumstance. Business relationships therefore rely partly on the expectations that partners will act in good faith. In high trust environments, economic transactions occur more smoothly. Businesses invest in long term relationships with suppliers. Credit flows easily between lenders and borrowers. Partnerships form across industries and regions. Trust reduces the cost of monitoring and enforcement. When participants believe agreements will be honored, fewer resources are spent guarding against opportunistic behavior. Economists sometimes describe trust as a form of social capital, not written into law, but supporting the function of formal institutions. Society where trust is widespread often experience more efficient economic activities because agreements can be executed with less friction. When contracts break down, when contract enforcement fails, economic activities becomes far more difficult. An environment where courts are slow, corrupt, or unreliable, businesses must take additional precautions before entering agreements. They may require large upfront payments, avoid long lease contracts, or restrict transactions to trusted partners. These precautionary limit the scale of economic activity. Supply chains become shorter, investments become more cautious, financial markets become less developed. Without reliable contracts, enforcement, the economic clock begins to slow. Contracts form isolated transactions into ongoing systems of cooperation, and those systems form the network through which the economic clock operates. Douglas North, Institutions and Economic Growth. In the late 20th century, an economic historian named Douglas North began asking a question that had puzzled economists for generations. Why do some societies become wealthy while others remain poor? For much of the 20th century, economists tended to focus on factors such as capital investment, education, technological process. Countries that invested in factories, infrastructure, and human capital were expected to grow. But North believes something important was missing from this explanation. Across the world, many countries had access to similar technology, many possessed natural resources and capable workers, yet their economic outputs were dramatically different. The difference, North argued, laid in the institutions. The rules that shape incentives. North's core insight was simple but powerful. Economic performance depends heavily on rules governing economic activity. If those rules create incentives for productive behavior, investment, innovation, trade, economic systems tend to grow. If those rules reward extraction, corruption, or arbitrary power, economic development slows or stops. When the rules of the game are predictable and individuals and businesses can plan for the future, they invest in future factories, research new technologies, and build long-term partnerships. But when the rules are unpredictable, when properties may be confiscated or contracts ignored, economic factors, economic actors hesitate to commit resources. The result is a less productive economy. Transaction cost. One of North's key contribution was emphasizing the importance of transactions cost, the hidden cost involved in making economic exchanges. These include negotiation agreements, verifying information, enforcing contracts, resolving disputes.